What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another Detroit Lions training camp video. That's right. Today we are here to discuss what I took away from today's training camp for the Detroit Lions in person. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, we are back with another video similar to what we did last year, where we go through my notes that I took from training camp and watching the practice. This was the first practice that I've been at this year, so it's the first time I got to see a lot of these guys live in a Lions uniform. They were fully padded. It was a longer practice, as apparently Sunday was a little bit shorter, so today was a little bit longer. So there was a lot going on, a lot of notes to get from practice. So it was great. It was super enjoyable, and it was my first time watching a lot of players. So I haven't read a ton of stuff because I didn't want to have, maybe like my mind clouded and expecting one thing or thinking one thing even if I didn't even see it, just because it was kind of already in my head. So I really wanted to come in this with kind of clear vision, and I think I did for the most part. There were some positions that really excited me, and I was like, wow, this looks really impressive, and we'll get into that pretty quickly here. And there was a couple guys that stood out. There was a lot that went on today, so we're going to get into all of those things. Now, before I get into that, I want to start off with the injury side of things. Tomorrow we plan on being live with Rad, so we could talk more about training camp. So if there's anything that I don't say in this video that you guys want to know more about tomorrow that I saw, let me know. Ask me in the comment section when we're live tomorrow, and I'll tell you everything that I remember or anything I took notes on. With that being said, though, we'll start with the injuries first. Now, some of these could be a little bit off in the sense that these aren't all necessarily like confirmed. It's just one, what did I see at practice, and two, what has been reported by the time I'm recording this video. So there's certain guys that I don't really know anything on. I just know maybe there was something going on there. So I'll give you that information, and tomorrow we can always kind of come back to it and say, okay, we're confirmed. We know what's going on with this situation. So starting with that first, for example, Marvin Jones Jr., I saw him participating individual drills. He was going through walkthroughs. I did not see him go through team drills, but Marvin Jones Jr. was back, and I knew that was a little bit different. So it had been reported that he was activated off of the NFI list. So Marvin Jones Jr. is back. He was doing autographs after practice. I did not see him in team drills, but I did see him through individual drills. They had a new drill that they were doing, and it was nothing crazy, but receivers stood in a straight line across from each other just playing catch, and I saw him there, and I was like, dang, I think that's Marvin. So he's back. That's fantastic news. Some more good news. Jameson Williams returned to practice as well. It was his first padded practice coming off a minor lower body injury. So this is the first time in pads for Jameson Williams. And I would say in terms of, I wrote it down a lot in my notes, timing, things just seem to be a little bit off. Sometimes it could potentially be on his side. Sometimes it could be on the quarterback. Other times it could be just developing that chemistry because he's missed some time. So I think all those things play a factor in some of the reps that you saw today where things were just incomplete because the timing just looked simply off. And I have some good examples. There was one that comes to mind immediately where the guy was wide open and it was just like the ball was thrown out of bounds. It was weird. But regardless, timing is something that's going to need to be dialed in. We know we won't have him for the first 6 games, but if he's practicing, that should get better. On the bad side of things, and again, I don't know any of the details on this situation. Maybe it's not bad. We'll know a little bit later, I'm sure. But Shane Zylstra did go down towards the end of practice, going through some team drills, and I guess he was hit low. I didn't necessarily see the hit. I just saw that, he got hit. I didn't see how he got hit, but I saw that he got hit from where I was sitting. He had players crowd around him. He was down for a little while, and then he had help to walk off. So Shane Zylstra dealt with an injury. I hope it's not too serious, but he was taken off, and once that happened, essentially Dan Campbell was just like, I think he just like blew the whistle, and then they got into some special teams drills, and then they went back to, I believe, some 11-on-11, and it wrapped up. But they kind of moved out of that once that happened. So hopefully Shane Zylstra is all right. That was more towards the end of practice, but that did happen. Also, Sam Laporta, again, I don't have all the details here. I saw him at the beginning. I had some of my notes on one-on-one drills where I was like, oh, I noted Sam Laporta there. But as practice went on, I didn't really notice him anymore. And I heard that, Laporta was maybe out there working with the trainer a little bit. Maybe there was something that, he had minor in practice. Again, we'll have more details on that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But as of now, that's all that I know there. And then also Derek Barnes, I saw him get shaken up a little bit in a special teams drill, but I didn't see him miss any time. I saw him get right back into line, and he seemed to be fine. Also, Aaron Glenn spoke about Levi Onwuzurike, saying how good it was to see him back from his injury. And you did see him participate. I wouldn't say necessarily a ton, but I saw him go through some team drills. He got work in there in some 11-on-11 looks. And there was one example that sticks in my mind where he was working to handle a double team block, and I think he handled it pretty well. That one stands out to me. So he was out there, which is fantastic. And I think kind of like the way that Aaron Glenn put it, like just the fact that he was able to battle back from such a serious injury at a position that's a terrible spot to have that injury. I guess any position would be terrible to have a back injury, but with the amount of force that goes into every single snap, snap, I mean, that is tough. Just the fact that he's been able to battle back from that, it kind of, to me, goes back to when we initially drafted him. Remember how fired up his, like, introductory presser was? It wasn't necessarily PG, I don't think. Either way, the fact that he has battled himself back, I think, is outstanding. Going through some of my side notes that I just kind of jotted down as I was watching practice, the first thing would be, when you saw the way that they aligned in walkthroughs, I saw Kirby Joseph getting the reps at the safety position. Meanwhile, CJ Gardner-Johnson was getting the reps in that slot role. However, I did see later in practice occasions where Gardner-Johnson would get moved around. There was a good example where he rolled into a free safety alignment. Now, we've seen that in the past where our slot will roll into that, but he was there pre-snap and the other safety rolled down into the box against a heavier personnel set. So you did see that flexibility, but I know through walkthroughs I did see Kirby at safety, him at slot, which meant Tracy Walker was the other safety, and it is nice to see Tracy Walker out there. I know he made some flashes in team drills specifically. Also, I think the versatility in the front, and this is going to be something to keep an eye on for sure when I can see it from like an all-22 perspective. It's going to be a lot easier when I can pause and drag and those things, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see the versatility up front. I thought you saw a lot of 9 techniques from the edge rushers. The Lions also showcased some 5-1 front looks, meaning having 5 guys across the line of scrimmage, not necessarily all with their hand in the dirt, but they would roll into some 5-1 looks. For example, Derek Barnes on one play rolled down to the edge position, Aiden Hutchinson kicked inside to an inside technique, and then I believe it was Jack Campbell, it could have been Alex Anzalone, that rolled into the off-ball linebacker look. But that was something that you did see. I saw some 5-1 looks defensively where they would just roll one off-ball linebacker. You know, we've seen Alex do that in the past. We've also seen Alex play on the edge. Derek Barnes line up on the edge at times when they rolled into that today. And then also you look at a guy like Jack Campbell and his physicality and build, you would expect that he would be pretty comfortable doing that as well. So you saw that, and you also got, you know, kind of more your typical 4-2 type of looks defensively. But the Lions would put those 3 big bodies in the front, and they would have the 2 kind of 9 techniques. And you saw that with Julian, you saw that with Romeo, you saw that with Charles, you saw that with Hutch, you saw that with, I'm trying to think exactly who, James Houston. So you saw that in the Pascals and the Kaminskis, they could hold down some of those defensive end positions in those alignments. That doesn't mean they were always 9 techniques, but I did see that. So it was just something that stood out when you look at the schematic side. Also through walkthroughs, speaking offensive line, Jermaine Ifedi, who the Lions signed this offseason, which I loved. I felt like he could be a backup swing tackle for us. That's where I saw him aligned through walkthroughs. He played right tackle and left tackle going through walkthroughs. Big V was also out there playing guard, and Darren Powell was getting some guard reps as well. Oh, I forgot a couple notes. So just to kind of wrap up on the injury front, Penei Sewell in concussion protocol, won't be back till at least Wednesday, but it was reported that he was in good spirits today. And then Mosley remains on the PUP list, as well as Hendon Hooker on the NFI list. I forgot to mention that. Want to throw that in there for the injury side of things. Oh yeah, and then my final outside note, Chase Cota, the undrafted free agent receiver, dude looks like a tight end. From afar, I thought he was DJ Hawkinson. I was like, I know that's not Hawkinson, but I kept looking at him like, maybe? I mean, look, maybe he got the wrong like, I don't know. Maybe somehow he just ended up here. It was like stuck in his GPS. So maybe when he was driving to the Vikings training camp, he clicked the wrong one. Here he is, Detroit. Boom. No. He looked like a much skinnier version of TJ Hawkinson. It was Chase Cota. It was Chase Cota. But anyways, let's get into some of these drills, some of my takeaways. I'll try to fly through these because I got a lot of notes, but I'll try to also kind of emphasize certain players that stood out to me as we go through these. So hang with me. We'll start off from the beginning, and some of the notes that I had here first, some of the 1v1 work, or 1 versus 1 work, and similar to what they did when I was there last season at training camp, is where they have the 1 defender and the 1 ball carrier. Ball carrier is trying to score, the defender's trying to stop him. Now, I couldn't tell necessarily how wide the cones were, but it wasn't like 3 yards. I mean, it was pretty wide, maybe like 7 yards, somewhere in that range. Definitely know that I missed some reps going through things like this. Jack Campbell had a really nice tackle early in the drills. Then you looked at a guy like Kirby Joseph, who I thought was really flashing today. First off, the physicality. Like with Kirby Joseph, we know that he was a free safety. We know his ball skills, which, by the way, speaking of Kirby Joseph, I know y'all can't see it because of where the camera's at, but I'm going to tilt it real quick so y'all can see. Shout out to my man Michael Banks. Hey, y'all see that? That thing is fire. That thing is fire, that picture back there. I got to figure out a better way so you guys can see it, but it looks great to me. It looks fantastic. Kirby Joseph today, what stood out to me was the run defending, the feistiness that he was hitting with. We know about his ball skills as a free safety, and I won't act like this is something that's necessarily new. Last season, he showed physicality when rolling down because they do ask him to play, and they ask their safeties to be versatile. Like sometimes you're the free safety and you have to cover, as a single high look. Other times you're going to roll down, ask to be played man, and other times you got to give us some run support. Well, his physicality I thought showed off in this drill. Didn't mean that every tackle was perfect. I thought the last one was a little bit high, but there were also some good wrap-ups. But it was feisty, man. It was a feisty wrap-up tackler that battled. That stood out to me a little bit for Kirby Joseph because you don't really think of him as that, but he showed that a lot in this drill. J. Gardner-Johnson, I mean, this drill is kind of made for him, I guess. I mean, just by the way that he plays. I saw him throw down, I believe it was Mohamed Ibrahim in one rep there. But also, Mohamed Ibrahim came back and completely juked out a defender. Okay, he absolutely put the dude on skates. It was probably the cleanest move that I saw in the entire drill. Malcolm Rodriguez, I saw him get 2 reps there against Sam Laporta. The first one, I saw Laporta essentially just get the edge, which I was like, I don't really know how wide this is, but it seemed like he just kind of ran around him. And then the second time, Malcolm Rodriguez had a really clean tackle. We know Rodriguez is a clean tackler. I thought you saw through the special teams reps, like, oh yeah, if he's out there, he's going to be very effective. That's a really nice matchup to keep an eye on. Who would win that more consistently? Probably Malcolm Rodriguez, but it's something to watch because Laporta has that ability with the ball in his hands. If you can regularly, or I wouldn't say regularly, but if you can win at a good percentage and make Malcolm Rodriguez miss and get by him, you're going to have some success because Rodriguez is a very consistent tackler. That is for sure. If he gets his hands on you, you're really not going anywhere. So when they kind of like confine you to an area, that's going to be difficult to break tackles and things like that. So the first time he just kind of ran around him, which would make sense. And then the other time it was a clean tackle by Malcolm Rodriguez. Now, there is one guy that I got to give a shout out to because, man, he was flashing over and over and over. And I wish we would have did a video on this player before this day because I had just got done taking notes on this guy. Not enough maybe to do a video, but I had went through a few of his games. And this is just a freak athlete. This is, and I'm going to probably say his name wrong, Trevor Nowalski. I know I'm saying the dude's name wrong, but he was an undrafted free agent signing for the Lions this offseason. 6'2.5", 237, that ran a 4.5 flat, 40-yard dash time at his pro day. Okay, so again, that's not official, but 25 bench press reps, 34.5-inch vertical, a 6.75 3-cone. Like, some of those are just incredible, and he looks like a pretty big dude. He looks bigger than what that's listed as, but regardless, when you watched him and you saw the versatility and the ways that they utilized him, especially on special teams, like, this is a guy I would definitely keep an eye on as the type of player that maybe makes team, maybe he doesn't, but look down the road for him to make an impact potentially for the Lions and kind of step in and then just pop out of nowhere, because I think you saw it in these drills as well. As a tackler, he kind of looked like a black hole, man. I mean, he was just kind of swarming up ball carriers as a run defender. There were areas that truly needed work when I watched him, and I thought, you know, he was kind of like, what position is he going to play? But the Lions have seemingly used him in a very similar way, but the best way for him on the roster will be special teams. And for him, you didn't see him on the ground a lot. He didn't miss some tackles because he had that lateral agility and that quickness and that instant ability to open his hips and burst, and you see it on the interception. But then also in coverage, you know, some of the awareness and just the fluidity laterally, that closing speed. Like, this is a really good athlete that, yeah, he's going to have to figure out what position fits him best and how to play that more efficiency with block shedding. It's an elite athleticism build for an off-ball linebacker, but almost like James Houston in a different sense. So we kind of tried to play it off-ball linebacker early, and then we're like, no, let's just put him at edge. It feels like that similarly, where he kind of has an off-ball linebacker build, but he played like slot/edge. So can he make that transition, or will the Lions just say, hey, just stick him at edge and let him play fast? Because if he consistently wins as a pass rusher there, he might find a way to make the team. And you would see it kind of in his film. You know, for him, a lot of times he kind of aligned in like the slot role or the edge position. And you saw for the Lions, they utilized him a lot there. Now, a lot of times with the third team, but they allowed him to rush the passer. They allowed him to try to set the edge. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to spoil it. But in this drill in particular, he showed that prowess as a run defender and the athleticism to really make it difficult for guys to get away from him. You do that and you show efficiency as a tackler, you're going to be able to fight into a special teams role. So I would keep an eye on that. That was something that really jumped out to me at the NFL level. Went to college at Saginaw Valley State, so we know the competition is like a big time step up, so that was impressive. I'll definitely be keeping my eye on him. Then the Lions did a little bit of a blocking drill, like kind of a receiver screen where the slot would run the screen and the receiver block, so like a bubble screen, and they did that drill, and I thought there was some really good notes that I got here. First off, Denzel Mims, I thought flashed some real ability to block, some feistiness as well. You just look at his build, you would expect that, but I think we even said when we talked about him, like, the guy has upside to be a really solid blocker, and And I thought you really saw that when you went through this drill in particular. Excellent block on Brian Branch. And Brian Branch, I thought, had one of the cleanest days today of anybody. Just clean playmaking, not a lot of getting burnt. Really clean day today. But he had an excellent block on Brian Branch. And the first rep that he had was also a good block. So back to Brian Branch. We saw a really clean shed on Josh Reynolds. Brian Branch had a fantastic day today, in my opinion. I think he showed off a lot of his strengths in terms of what I thought about him. I thought his run support was like push an elite category. You know, the ability to play the run, efficiency as a tackler, block shed, blitzing, I thought was a really high upside. I thought he showed all the things that I really liked. And he was just like, yeah, this is something I'm going to do in the NFL too. You know, it wasn't like, oh man, okay, he had that. Is it still in there? Let's tap into it. It was like, I'm just going to carry what I did from college and literally just throw it to the NFL. We'll see. It was my first day of camp, but I'm like, yeah, he kind of looks like a pro. He kind of looks like a pro with the things that he's good at already. They just seem to translate immediately for him. So I'm excited. I'm more excited about this draft selection. As if I could get more excited. Chase Cota did a nice job maintaining his block. I also have Trinity Benson in here with a strong block. But there was a lot of feistiness between C.J. Gardner-Johnson, between Jamison Williams, and I believe it was Starling Thomas V a little bit later in practice. There was some feistiness. Wilt Harris was going at it in some of these drills. And then I also had Jerry Jacobs with a nice block shed, and we know this is an area where he does pretty well. Now on to some of the wide receiver DB one-on-one when they were just matched up one-on-one. Let's start with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just looks different. When you watch him out there, just the game is really slow for him, it feels like. I mean, he could be completely contested and still find a way to come up with a grab. That was his first reception, was a contested grab on Brian Branch. Then I had Jerry Jacobs, who maybe could have been called for pass interference on a slant. It was incomplete. Trinity Benson, I thought it was a good start and then maybe a little bit of a tug coming out of the break. It possibly could have been a PI. There was no refs there or anything, so I don't know. But either way, I thought that one was potentially a little bit close. C.J. Gardner-Johnson then came back and he was beat by Denzel Mims on a slant. Now that was contested well. That's one thing you'll see about Gardner-Johnson is he contests everything. Denzel Mims showed, I think, flashed real ability through this blocking drill and then the one-on-ones as a receiver. You know, he can win a little bit of a different way. But with that physicality, he is a tough matchup, and I thought you got to see that a little bit in this drill. Khalif Raymond, you saw him just kind of burn Jaron Williams down the sideline, scored a touchdown. They were like 20 yards out doing this drill, and then they moved inside a little bit. But Khalif Raymond, what you like about him is there's not a lot of extra. You know, you watch the way that he was running routes, even through individual drills. There's not a lot of beating of the drum at break points. It doesn't look like choppy. It's very smooth. It's plant, stick. It's like, okay, that's just difficult. And we know that Khalif is very quick, but when you see him run his routes, there's just something about it. They're just so smooth. There's not a lot of just, you know, random steps for no reason. Everything sync, cut, break. It's all very fluid, all well together. Cameron Sutton, another guy. And this is kind of my overarching theme for a lot of the day. The secondary was very impressive to me. It really did look like a whole different secondary. Now, I know we got a lot of turnover there, but man, like some of these guys that you anticipated, like, okay, they're going to be like legit players because we've seen it elsewhere. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, it showed up today. Brian Branch, it showed up. Now, he's a draft pick, but it showed up. Cam Sutton, very impressive. Cam Sutton had a very impressive day. He needs to get some attention. Now, we know Mosley's not out there right now. Jerry Jacobs was opposite of him. But Cam Sutton looks legit, man. Like, he is a 1/2. Like, he is a top cornerback. He looks like just a legit, bona fide starter. Like, that guy just gets on the field. Not a lot of questions going to be had about that player. Even though he's a little bit undersized and there are certain positions that you may not love him in, and we've talked through all these things. He's not the most dynamic athlete. All of these things. In his role, he's really legit. He's really solid. And that started off with a pass breakup, face guarding Josh Reynolds, but also not being overly physical, not grabbing, just getting in a face guard position, breaking up a pass. And you're talking about the 20, the 10-yard line. Like, that's a size mismatch. Now, I would like to see them throw maybe more, go up and get it and see if he could defend that. But there was one later that he broke up, and it was a little bit of a different route. And it's just like, man, that's super impressive that he's able to do that. That guy is tight. He's clean. He looks like he's going to be really solid for us. So it kind of speaks to the deal that they gave out to the player. They seem to have confidence in him, and I think that showed up today. Khalil Dorsey, I had with great coverage on Maurice Alexander. Alexander came back with a one-handed catch a little bit later that was well contested. And then Jamison Williams, as I touched on, Starling Thomas V, they were just getting into it. Dylan Drummond, he had his way, I think, a little bit here with Tracy. Now, you're talking about a receiver. Undrafted, yes, but a receiver against a safety, so it's not the easiest matchup. I've always felt like this was the area that Tracy was working to improve the most. Last year, I thought he was just getting extra reps to do that, and I thought you saw today, you know, he was beat twice by Dylan Drummond. It was a really good ball. The one time I think it was from Nate Sudfeld. I believe that's who threw it. And then the other one was a fade win that he had on him. But the first one, he kind of just got completely wide open on Tracy Walker on like a double move into the end zone. Will Harris, like I said, feistiness. There was a lot of competitiveness coming out of Will Harris today. He was battling at the line of scrimmage, the press attempts. I thought he had a nice little jam, but ultimately Green, as the rep kind of went on, got a little bit open, and he was able to complete a curl route on him. Kirby Joseph then was in coverage on Trey Quinn, and he forced an incomplete pass in a contested situation. You did see Trey Quinn, however, come back. That's the USFL signing from the Michigan Panthers, the receiver, and it was a little bit late in the play, but he ultimately broke away late, made a really nice hands grab. You see the hands catching. Now, he wasn't, super electric out of breaks, which was kind of anticipated from watching him, and I think that even showed up in the individual drills, and he worked back to the ball. You saw some strong hands there as well, so that was pretty impressive. Back to St. Brown. St. Brown completed a fade on Jerry Jacobs about 10 yards out. It looked like he kind of just kept Jerry inside. Jerry was sitting inside leverage. He honestly ran a fade, but Jerry really never got into a position to necessarily contest a pass there. And then Ife Melifonwu, I'm talking secondary. Ife was super impressive today. I mean, early I'm watching, like, who in the world is number 6? And I'm just writing it down, and then I realized, like, dang, that's Ife? Ife was making plays today, and the first one was a press win on a whip route covering Trinity Benson. He got some receiver reps. Now, in team drills, they play him at safety, so he was getting reps on tight ends. But through the one-on-one drills, he's getting reps against receivers. Speaking of whip routes, you had Khalif Raymond win his rep against Stephen Gilmore. And again, there was the Trinity Benson one, and, again, if he looked really good, and then you see Khalif basically run the same route, I think, on the opposite side of the field, and Khalif just looks different, man. Khalif's just route running is so tight, so difficult to keep up with. Another guy that popped in the secondary, Chase Lucas. I thought he looked like kind of the guy that, we saw the flashes of in the preseason. Some of the things that he liked there, I thought carried over to today. But Chase Lucas, I thought, had the best rep in this entire drill on Josh Reynolds when he was covering him into the back of the end zone, essentially forced him out of the end zone, forced an incomplete pass with an incompletion contested on Trinity Benson. So 2 good reps there for Lucas. And then again, real quickly, back to Jamison Williams, who had beat CJ Gardner-Johnson early in the rep, like right off the line. He was wide open into the end zone, and then the ball just kind of went like straight over his head, and I don't even know if Jamo was coming out of his break. Like, he was wide open. The timing was way off there. So it showed up there, and then it also showed up once in the team drills as well. The timing does not seem to be perfect right now. That's something that needs to be worked on, but he did get open at the very beginning of this route, so I guess that's a positive. One thing you saw about CJ Gardner-Johnson is when he got caught in trail, you saw a lot of patience within his game. Now, he could get a little bit handsy. He was in trail. You saw the ability to play through a receiver's eyes, play through his hands while face guarding. You saw that with Sutton, and I think that speaks to the comfortability that he had, and you're like, oh, this guy's legit. You saw that with Gardner-Johnson. Dan's already talked about that with Brian Branch, but you saw that with CJ. When he would get beat early, the ability to kind of stick into play, playing underneath the route, was something that was noticeable. And then again, he was just very fiery throughout the entire day. Some of these team drills, 11 on 11, we'll go through first team, second team, third team, that kind of thing. Just a couple of notes that I took from each possession. First one, we had the first team against first team. Charles Harris began with a pass breakup in the flat, defending the running back. Again, a lot of these guys were kind of playing in those wider alignments, so you're going to have to be able to drop comfortably into those positions. Juno Quora is also a guy I thought flashed today on special teams. He flashed one run defensive rep. He's been healthy. He's shown the ability to produce as a pass rusher, but regardless, that's kind of where we saw a lot of these guys align. So you started off with Charles with the pass breakup, and what I saw today was mainly like the number 1 team with Aiden Hutchinson. You saw Broderick Martin, and man, Broderick Martin's a big dude. Okay, first off, Lee McNeil, you could tell that he's like, lost the body fat. That dude looks really good. But then Broderick Martin, you saw him on, I believe it was a zone run. Yeah, he was on the backside of a zone run, but I believe he was playing the center and the guard there. I could be wrong, but he was on the backside of it. So you saw him try to handle kind of a double team, and I wouldn't say it was like the cleanest rep, but it was like an outside zone play. But because he held up both the center and held the guard while not getting just completely washed off a spot, basically held up the run long enough for a backside, basically just shut down the run for a very minimal gain. And I thought that really showed the potential of Broderick Martin with that size to not necessarily be the playmaker, but be the guy that allows others to make plays. And I thought one constant theme and team drills was running backs being forced to bounce. I thought there was a lot of traffic in the interior. There was occasional like big plays in the interior, but there weren't many. There was a lot of bounce to the outside, bounce to the outside. Now, the edge contain has to be better there, but there was a lot of really good, I thought, force on the interior between Bugs, who was the top guy with Lee McNeil, mixing in the Broderick Martins, like Benito Jones came in a little bit later. Then you talk about some of these UDFAs, the Christian Covingtons who made a play today, and then CJ Gardner-Johnson absolutely blew up Jahmyr Gibbs into the flat. So Goff, he was through, I think, multiple reads at that point, and he ended up checking it down to Jahmyr Gibbs, and I thought this was perfect, because this is exactly what we said in the CJ Gardner-Johnson video. We said that, look, he doesn't want to give up the underneath stuff. Like, he's the type of guy that's not going to just give you the check down and be like, I'll go up and make a tackle. He's like lurking that. So it makes it difficult for a quarterback because he's not going to allow you to just have your safety blanket. Now, there's risk to it. Things get behind him in zone, things like that. Especially in some of our concepts where you have the two over routes, right? We'll run like a deep over route. We'll run like a deep post, and then we'll have like the flat into the backfield. If CJ does not bite over top on that and he stays underneath and the ball does not come out over top and Goff decides to check it down, when that is the case, he's going to lurk and blow those things up. So it's one, going to force the quarterback to really want to push beyond that because he's not going to give you that. It's not going to feel like a safety valve, which I think is great because not every team takes that away. We saw that last year. He tries to take that away. It'll be a really fun balancing act between schematically, but also the quarterback and the balance of that. But Gibbs was lit up, man. The next unit starts off Christian Covington, run stuff on his zone play. I believe that's who it was. I was trying to tell after the play on the front side of his zone play. Then you had Nate Sudfeld with a very athletic spin out. One thing that stuck out to me was Sudfeld, seeing him in person, because again, I can only look back at the preseason film, things like that. The athleticism. I mean, I'm not saying he looked like a Lamar or something, like he wasn't running around and things like that, but he was a real athlete, and I thought you saw that, just a lot of twitch in his game when they were going through individual drills, the way that he would move through the pads, and just a very fast release, a lot of quick velocity in that release, and then this spin out was like, ooh, that was athletic as heck. The spin out was very quick, broke outside, broke contain when he felt some heat, found Jason Cabinda completely uncovered, breakdown there, wide open, and he ran for a big gain, and that was a very athletic move from Nate Sudfeld, so that popped a little bit. He probably doesn't get viewed as that, but I thought he showed some athleticism today. And then Craig and Jermar Jefferson, as I touched on, they were just forced to bounce often. Now, Craig was kind of, I think, the running back 3, and I thought Craig had a really nice day today, rocking that number 13, but that was kind of what we saw there from that next unit. Martinez out of Kansas State / Nebraska, and what stood out to me here about Martinez is kind of what I thought in the video where we said the quick processing. What I said about him, and I hadn't went through all his games, but I thought his biggest strength was honestly decision making. Look at the 3-play sample size, right? The first one was a nice touch pass, he put it over to linebacker completion. Then Julian Okwara making a really strong edge set, and there was some inconsistencies there, but he made a really strong edge set. And finally, it was Jalen Reeves-Maybin dropping into coverage, who got adequate depth, and he was able to get involved and essentially contribute to a pass breakup that was a forced incompletion down the field. Jalen Reeves-Maybin looked very comfy in coverage, and he served a pretty nice impact today across multiple drills when he was in coverage. Continuing with some of these 11-on-11 drills, I'll just kind of roll through them. Back to the starting unit, you start off with the guy, St. Brown, winning on a dig route on Jerry Jacobs, creating some space, winning there. Hutchinson created a little bit pressure on this play. Remember, Penei Sewell was not participating, so there was another example a little bit later, which we'll talk about, but that's very important. The next play, I noted CJ Gardner-Johnson, just how vocal he was. Like, he was trying to get everybody's attention. We got to be on the same page. We got to talk, those kind of things. Very loud, very vocal. He's going to be fantastic for this defense just in that sense alone. Just hopefully limiting breakdowns, things like that, especially when you get inside like the 5. But David Montgomery had a really nice cut. It was like a stretch or maybe an outside zone, and you saw the cut by David Montgomery, the plant cut up field on Kirby Joseph, made a nice little chunk. It was a nice pickup for him. You see that in his game. There's some flexibility in the lower body. You think about him as some bruiser and those things, which he is, but there is real flexibility to bounce and cut. It's really there, like it flashes, and I thought you saw that on this play in particular. Then you saw a little rollout there from Jared Goff. It may have been a bootleg away from the offensive line, and he hit Josh Reynolds on kind of like a comeback route, 15 yards. That was Jerry Jacobs who was in coverage. Another thing that I also noticed, and of course this can just be for camp, but you noticed kind of the personnel packages that they were able to roll into offensively. Specifically, there was a drive where Gardner-Johnson did a line at free safety where they put a fullback on the field. So it was Cabinda, and they were kind of in the offset eye, and they had a tight end in line, and you saw that flexibility. Then the second unit would come out with 2 tight end looks. So you saw kind of different personnel looks, like we could go 12 personnel. We could put a fullback in the game and go 21. So just a lot of flexibility in terms of some of their personnel packages with having Cabinda back, and also some of that tight end depth, specifically when they'll be healthy. Followed by Amon-Ra St. Brown, who dropped essentially just a little spot route underneath. He just bounced off, dropped it, and Gardner Johnson was right behind him to, basically yeah, we did that, that kind of thing, just kind of like the instigator that he is, and that essentially ended the drive. So the second unit, you had Jamison Williams mixing in here, you had James Mitchell mixing in, you had Jahmyr Gibbs mixing in because David was kind of like running with the number 1 team. It started off with Jahmyr Gibbs after taking the big hit with a check down underneath. Then Gibbs had probably the biggest run of the day where he popped one. He absolutely popped a huge run on a zone run. He made a nice little cutback from left to right, and he ended up kind of just popping through the hole. Now, I think Derek Barnes may have misfilled the run lane in this play because when Barnes was coming down, I couldn't really see it from the angle, but it kind of opened up for him, and he was able to get upfield. So Barnes may have, misplayed this fit. I'm not completely sure, though. Regardless, it was a pretty nice hole, it seemed, for Jahmyr Gibbs to get upfield. And then on the second level, you saw that shake, the safety, and it would have been an even bigger play. Like, he has that electricity. He has that home run juice. He has the home run juice. It's just a little bit different when he hits the second level. That guy is someone to fear when he gets out there in space. Now back to this dude, who I said had one of the cleanest days today. Brian Branch, man. So I talked about, the shedding of blocks. Well, how about the blitzing? He was so good as a blitzer. This is going to be a problem, I think. It starts off here on a backside rollout for the quarterback away from him. He was bringing a slot corner blitz. He sidestepped the tight end, completely made him whiff, didn't even get a hand on him, ran down the quarterback. It actually got contact, I believe it was on Sudfeld. So as he threw it, the ball came out bad. He forced it incompletion. I was like, wow, he looked like a missile on the backside. You could see him coming. You could see him just immediately make the tight end miss, and he was right there on the quarterback, man. Branch was so impressive today. And then finally, you had Ife Melifonwu contested tight coverage on Shane Zylstra. Zylstra pulled it down. Impressive catch, but it was really tight coverage, and everyone was kind of like, man, that was a really nice catch afterwards. And then he moved on to the third team, and here's where I was really impressed with Martinez, right? So first one was a very quick pass. Derek Jeast Jr., there was pressure right up the middle. I couldn't tell if it was a blitz or it was just pressure. It happened so fast, but there was pressure right in his face. So he found Derek Jeast really quickly over the middle, short pickup, but it got the ball out very quickly. The next play, we saw an outside run where Trevor Nowalski, who I thought had a really good day, but where he struggled was consistently setting the edge. And again, this is going to be something that's going to be a work in progress. He's got like 30-inch arms. I know he played kind of in that role / slot, but he wasn't always setting the edge. He did occasionally, but even when I watched him, you could see inconsistencies there of getting off blocks just in general. Like, you can watch him and be like, ooh, man, okay, there's some hit and miss here and how clean the block sheds are. That was the case today, and that really was emphasized. And I thought you saw, against the tight end, there was a good example, which we'll talk about, but this time he gave up the edge. However, Stephen Gilmore, he came firing down, ended up getting some contact. I don't know if he technically tackled him, but at the same time, he let a hit there. So regardless, we know that he's a pretty feisty corner as well. However, the next play, Trevor gets pressure, and he forces an incompletion. So this is an extreme athlete. I'm not saying he's James Houston because he's not, but he is an extreme athlete that's set on the edge. That's going to be kind of weird to try to figure out what his role is. But after having James last year, if they say, like, we're just going to kind of let him rush and see what happens, there could be really something here. He's someone to keep an eye on. You remember, James didn't have like an elite, training camp or anything like that, but, Trevor's a guy to keep an eye on with that athleticism. I thought he really popped today. So there he forced some pressure, and then finally Martinez came back. Now, if this was maybe not a first down pickup, okay, but quick processing, right? They had pressure. He found a quick slant with pressure in his face in a zone hole, completion, and he threw that to Chase Cota. Very fast processing for Martinez, getting the ball out of his hands. Super impressed with that. And then we go to the 7-on-7. I believe it was 7-on-7, something like that. Essentially, there was no defensive line versus offensive line. It was just quarterback versus weapons. That kind of quarterback and weapons versus, coverage. So you had your underneath linebackers, your two underneath linebackers, and you had your defensive backs. So that's the drill and what it looked like. And to start off with Jamison Williams running like a dig route into the front of the end zone. It was incomplete. Where he was and where the ball was were way off. It was like kind of low. He was like kind of really awkwardly going down for the football. The timing just looked messed up on that play. That had Jerry Jacobs in coverage. Next one, Josh Reynolds was able to sit basically behind Jack Campbell in the back of the end zone. He caught a touchdown in the back of the end zone. Then you had C.J. Gardner-Johnson with a pass breakup on Shane Zylstra. This play was impressive because it wasn't the first read. So what you did like is that there were a lot of times I felt the quarterback was forced to go from 1-2 and then find 3, forced to roll, do something else, because if that can can be the case, if the communication's just on point, that's going to be big. There was a lot of that where it was just that, oh, they properly switched it off. Lions are super creative at the end zone. We know this. So when they go with the 7-on-7 and you're at the 20-yard line, the 10-yard line, they're going to try to move pieces. They have fast motions, things like that. Now, it can be more chaotic with more players, but if we can just communicate the initial reads and take that away without a bust, the quarterbacks aren't trying to necessarily force that in. So it forces them back through their reads. First off, that allows pressure to get home, hopefully. That being said, for the sake of this drill, I did see a lot of things like that, which is very promising. But here you saw him go through 1-2, came back to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and he ended up basically just driving down, breaking up a pass on Shane Zylstra. Again, he was fired up after that play. And then the next play, Jameson Williams ended up scoring a touchdown. He got in the back of the end zone. I believe it was Gardner-Johnson in coverage, but he was pretty far separated from him. It could have been he just blew by him. I believe, though, that he necessarily didn't have help over the middle, because what happened was their underneath linebacker played a drag, which was Derek Barnes. He covered it well, really took it away. But behind that, the second level had C.J. Gardner-Johnson on J-Mo, and J-Mo went back there, and there was no one to kind of cut that off. So you could see that maybe he was expecting something to be there, and there wasn't, and he threw it, basically right over top to an open Jameson Williams, kind of just sitting in the back of the end zone. Continuing, however, Savion Smith, really nice pass breakup on Denzel Mims, high pointing up the football, and this was a nice rep of, I was focused on Jack Campbell for these next couple plays. Jack Campbell took away a little bit of a slot curl route. It wasn't much after it, but he kind of just sat down. He was able to take that away. And then the next play, super impressive here, you see Jack Campbell take off. He recognizes the quarterback is looking at a little like hitch route in the end zone. He launches that way to his right, and he ends up falling. He's running so fast, but he cuts it off. He took it away, and you see the quarterback look there, and he just pumps it and puts it back down because Jack just takes off and takes it away. Now, he slipped and fell, but you saw the fast recovery, the athleticism, got back on his feet, and I think as the play wore on, someone broke wide open on the far side, and I couldn't tell what happened, but Jack did take away the initial read, and that's kind of what a lot of those guys were doing in this drill, just take away the underneath things. So I thought there was two nice little reps from him. The linebacker category, how about Derek Barnes? Running down the flat. They threw a flat up to Jamar Jefferson. They got through it and stopped it essentially at the 2-yard line. And what was good about this is the linebackers felt like they were on a string as well. And we'll talk about that more, but I think the vets are really helping here, as well as, Jack Campbell, because when you look at it, you saw Jack Campbell and Malcolm play today. The two top backers a lot of the time were Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell. Those guys were kind of rocking together. Then you would see Alex Anzalone with Derek Barnes. Then you would see Jack Campbell and Malcolm Rodriguez. And I think that's what we're going to see because, again, like I said, when we did that podcast with Red, I think skill set wise, build wise, it's going to pull the best out of a guy like Alex, but it also could help Malcolm because it gives him that partner with a little bit more size and a little bit of a different skill set than necessarily he has, and it could open him up a little bit. But regardless, then you go on to Chase Lucas with a really nice drive down. He was sitting in zone coverage, limited the gain. That gave me flashbacks to the preseason where he was kind of like shutting down underneath passes, just limiting them. This was a really good example of that. Also, I really like the number that I think he's rocking 27. It looks good. I like the 27. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, this was clean. This is what I talk about linebackers on the string. So now it was Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Anthony Pittman. And Jalen was doing really well in terms of coverage depth. I thought we had some hit and miss there from other guys, but he was doing really well getting depth and coverage. He looks very comfortable there. However, this was a good example. So you had Jalen Reeves-Maybin fill first. Now they were basically running a flat with the running back, and they kind of just sat down a curl, right inside. So both linebackers had to roll that way and take both away. And you saw Jalen Reeves-Maybin essentially kind of pace himself, and I thought the ball was going to hit the flat. And then he took off and took that away. And immediately the quarterback pulled down and went right to the curl, and you saw Anthony Pittman just fire in. Boom. Break the ball up, and it was really well. It looked really good in hindsight that they were playing on a string like that. Stephen Gilmore then with the contested pass breakup on Antoine Green in the corner of the end zone, and then finally, as I touched on, Jalen Reeves-Maybin tips a pass straight up into the air that would have been open in the back of the end zone, but he got his hand on it, tips it up, incomplete. Jalen was pretty impressive today because we expect him to be good in coverage, and that's what he was today. And then finally, some final 11-on-11 notes that I had. Starts off 1-versus-1 team. Aiden Hutchinson beats Matt Nelson pretty cleanly. Again, the backup tackle was in, so he's lined up against Nelson. He beat him pretty much immediately, and that would have been a sack. The play went on, but it would have been a sack, so I just kind of stopped there. Then Aleem McNeil had a shed. Now, you could see he slimmed down. I believe he was in the 3-tech here, and he had a really nice shed. Now, he got his hand on him, like his full arm, but he didn't tackle him because they weren't really doing that. I don't know if he would have actually brought him down or not, but the coaching staff was fired up for Mac because he was able to shed, get back there, and it would have been hit behind the line of scrimmage, I believe. It was Derek Barnes and Alex Anzalone now that we're playing together, as I kind of touched on. And this next play had Charles Harris get some pressure, and then Brian Branch, once again, breaking the ball up at the line of scrimmage. I don't even know if he was blitzing on this play, but he was on the left side of the offensive line, the right side of the defensive line, and he was just kind of standing in the quarterback's passing lane, and you just see him leap up and knock the ball down. And that's something we saw a lot at Alabama. If he couldn't get there, he was going to get his hands. And I didn't think he had as many pass tips as he should have. There was a lot of plays at Bama where the ball didn't get tipped, but he was like right there. I mean, you see him just launching into passing lanes. He's very football intelligent in that sense, and to show up today with multiple breakups at the line of scrimmage, it paid off today. Like I'm saying, there are things that his skill set just feel like they're just translating into the NFL. Obviously, it's training camp, but it looks good so far. So far, so good. And then it had Cameron Sutton with a pass breakup. He was lined up on an island. Josh Reynolds ran a whip route, which is probably not something I would consistently run, but we've seen him do this. He's not electric out of it, but we've seen him on the backside run these kind of routes. But it seemed like this was the intended target because he was on an island, and that's the route that he ran, which is a little bit confusing. I wouldn't do that very often, but maybe it's just to get the look. Cameron Sutton, though, he broke that pass up. And then you had Jared Goff rolling to his right and finding Khalif Raymond, who kind of just sat down into the end zone from like 2 yards out. It was a really nice find. From my angle, it was really clean because everybody was kind of covered up from what I could see. Goff kept rolling, and he was able to kind of just fire it back, and Khalif just sat down and picked it up and scored a touchdown. So that was a very, very clean find there. And then with the second unit, because we really didn't have a third unit, it started off with Starling Thomas contesting Denzel Mims on an incomplete pass. Here we had Julian and Romeo both out there at the same time together, which is exciting. Then you had a screen where Will Harris got contact, kind of blew it up, but I don't know if he actually would have made the tackle here, but he definitely got a hit on the runner. We saw Jack Campbell and Malcolm Rodriguez, as I just touched on, playing together, which I really love that combination, but they were both on the field together now with the second unit. This is where you saw Trevor again not being able to set the edge. They ran to his side, and he was being blocked by Brock Wright. Brock Wright, great block, basically just kind of sewed him up, hemmed him off, and he wasn't able to get to the edge, and the running back just kind of cleanly ran into the end zone. So that will be a work in progress. He's going to have to get better there. Again, he's not big, but against tight ends, you want to see wins, right? Maybe not against OT, offensive tackles, for a guy that's 237, but against tight ends, you need more consistency. And Brock Wright's not the biggest dude, but we know he can block. In this case, he blocked well. So it's going to be good competition for him. In the next play, they had pretty much a wide open touchdown. Julian and Tracy were over there. Something went down, but it wasn't covered. Maybe Julian was late. Maybe Tracy didn't get out there, but it was open into the flat. And then again, the third unit, I had a really nice, I thought, blitz pickup from Brad Cecile, who was sitting at right guard, but that's when Shane Zylstra was injured, so it kind of just ended. Now, really quickly, before I get to my final special teams notes, first off, if I have the wrong player, I apologize for any of these. That's probably just going to happen. Also, I know I probably missed some plays within this. I can think of some on top of my head that I may have missed. Like when I said Craig Reynolds and those guys were forced to, cut outside. There were plays like that. I just didn't maybe have the exact order of them, and one of them was really nice cut for Craig. I thought Craig did well today between special teams and running back with that 13. But also, before we get into the special teams notes, I did not see the very final, 11 on 11, maybe 5 or 6 plays that they ran. I don't believe the offense scored. There was one that was a near interception. I know there was a throwaway in there. I think Tracy broke up one of those passes, but I didn't see that final set. So I'm not going to speak on that. I was in a different spot at that time, so I'm just going to kind of go with the notes that I have. And that leaves me with some of these special teams notes, and I'll fly through these, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Some of these special teams notes, and basically what they were doing was kind of the short kick return where they would have 2 defenders and 2 blockers and the returner. Focus on kind of that battle of who's going to block well, who's going to position well, who's able to shed the block and then make the play, not just shed the block out of the play. And I thought you saw Julian do really well in this drill. Julian and Malcolm started it off, really nice repositioning. Iffy with a nice reposition on Savion Smith. Trey Quinn, who had a really immediate block shed, but he didn't make the stop on the play, didn't align himself to make a play. Then Jaron Williams and Denzel Mims had good blocks. Again, I think Mims' real ability to block here, which could help his special teams chances if they decide to keep him around for that reason. Then Gilmore and Trevor both had sheds. Neither of them had the stop, though. Jason Cabinda's clean, in the sense of Jason Cabinda just seems to kind of get it. He's played some special teams for us, and I like the ability to, not get called for flags. The other guy that I wrote something similar about was Craig Reynolds. Craig Reynolds played a lot of special teams for us. Not as a returner, but sometimes as the up back, and you see it with Craig is that really tight hands-on contact, gets inside, doesn't grab, gets really tight inside, and he had one of the cleanest blocks because he got right in the chest, and he just kind of carried the block throughout the rep. Those were two guys I noted that looked very clean in this drill. Trevor with a great block in this drill. Barnes, I had Barnes beating Jack Campbell. Diddy Pittman just did enough on his block, which led to a score. And then finally, Brady Breeze, I thought had an excellent block that was able to kind of pop a touchdown. So, you know, there was some really good there, I think, in terms of the blocking. As the drill went on, really nice blocking from the special teams unit. They spend a lot of time there. You can see it. And there's really nice special teams players that the Lions have. And there's kind of like the next wave of players that they seemingly are developing with some carryover players. With that being said, I also had the special team stats in terms of field goals. So for both kickers today, first off, I believe these were the same lengths, but I couldn't tell from the first kicker, which was John Parker Romo. So I'll read through Riley Patterson first, and I believe they were probably the same distances for both kickers, I would assume. Starting with Riley Patterson, he had a kick from the 22-yard line, which is where the ball was placed, not necessarily where he was kicking from, but where the ball was placed. Placed at the 22-yard line, made that kick, made it from the 24-yard line, missed it from the 28-yard line wide right, then came back, made it from the 30, and then made it from the 33. So he went 4 for 5. And then John Parker Romo made his first, his second, the third one, which was just right down the middle. You could see there's a nice little leg there, just in terms of, man, that thing gets some air on it. That's the biggest thing that stands out. He gets a lot of air. You saw Riley Patterson, I believe, on his fourth or fifth one. You see how it kind of like was more of a line drive, which was nice. But this guy consistently gets air on the football. Then his fourth one he made as well, and he missed his fifth one, which did not have a ton of leg. It was a little bit higher, but it wasn't like, you know, it was by a ton. It would have gotten in if it was straight, but it wasn't by a ton. And that one was the final kick that he missed, and that was wide right as well. So he missed a longer one, and he was 4 for 5 on the day. So those are some of the notes that I have from the special teams unit. But yeah, those are the guys that stood out to me today. I'll leave it there because I know this video is already long enough. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. We plan on being live tomorrow so we can talk more about these things. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.